I know one of the reasons why I'm so successful is because of the foundation, my upbringing. I had access to so much. I learned public speaking. I learned what a leader was. I learned how to build community. I learned what it was like to delegate and work with people. It was built into my psyche. So now when I teach students, the first thing I say to them is that I'm not teaching you how to be a stage manager. Anybody can teach you that. I'm giving you the tools for you to find yourself and find your voice, which will hopefully take steps for you to be a better human.
This is Arts Educators Save the World, where successful artists and their mentors talk about how arts education transformed their lives. Hey, Alec. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Arts Educators Save the World, a podcast where artists and their mentors talk about the impact of arts education on both their lives. I'm so glad to see you, Alec.
I am so glad to see you, too.
We have a great show today. This conversation was probably the most extensive mentor-mentee relationship that we've had on the show. These two folks, professional production stage manager Cody Renard Richard and his high school theater teacher, Carrie Wood, not only were student teacher, but were what Carrie referred to as child-parent relationship. Yeah. And Carrie and her husband, who was the tech ed teacher at the time that Carrie was the theater teacher where Cody went to high school, helped Cody not only get into college, but to receive a complete and full scholarship for his higher education. So this is really an example of how arts education is so much more than just learning how to make art, but is about shaping the direction of somebody's life.
I think also if you've come here, we've obviously talked a lot about artists who are doing the equivalent of painting and clay making and glass making and performing on stage. And a stage manager is a different breed of cat. But if you don't know really what stage managers do, don't worry. We definitely talk you through it. But just know that they are the center of the wheel. I think someone uses that description in the middle of it. I don't remember things very well, but I believe someone said that. And it really is, no matter what line of work you're in, from the most artistic to the least, or whatever is the opposite of artistic, there's someone in your world that's a stage manager who is ensuring that the people around them are doing their best work and making it happen. So hearing what that job means just in general, I think is going to be really interesting for people who don't know, and people who do know. They're all going to be like, oh yes, sing it.
Because I think Cody represents the absolute best version of what that is. Right. So not only is it a great primer for listeners who don't know what production stage management is, but as you're saying, Alec, for people who do know what it is, this human being represents the absolute best of that field. Enjoy, everybody. Welcome, everyone, to Arts Educators Save the World. I'm so thrilled to be here today. As I normally do, I'm going to introduce the artist that we have here and then offer him the privilege of introducing the real star of today's show, which is our educator. But for me, it is an honor to introduce one of today's most successful and daring production stage managers across theater, opera, television, and circus, Cody Renard Richard. This is a first for us at Arts Educators Save the World. We've talked with writers, we've talked with TV showrunners, but we've never gone backstage to the technical arts surrounding production. So I'm really excited to get into some of the nitty-gritty of the art form of making technical theater. But before we dive in, I want to share with our listeners just some of Cody's amazing accomplishments, which have made him what one journalist describes as the millennial face of stage management, which props to that journalist. I love that. moniker. I hope you wear it proudly. Cody has been on Broadway as a stage manager and a production stage manager for everything from Hamilton to Sweeney Todd to Pass Over, which was the first new play to open after the coronavirus pandemic. So I can only imagine the work that Cody had to do to make that a successful production. He's stage managed live television musicals, including Annie, Jesus Christ Superstar, and The Wiz. He has worked on the MTV Video Music Awards and the Tony Awards, and he's worked with Cirque du Soleil and the Metropolitan Opera, that little thing. He has received 2 Tony Awards for co-producing A Strange Loop and the revival of Parade. He is one of the Kennedy Center's Next 50 cultural leaders, artists across fields who were selected for their ability to move us toward a more inspired, inclusive, and compassionate world. And it seems to me that this honor, though I've just met you, is really fitting for a person who both exhibits artistic excellence and is a fierce advocate for artists of color and queer artists working in the technical arts behind the scenes. Cody teaches emerging artists at Columbia and NYU. He's on the board of trustees for Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. And he established and runs the Cody Renard Richard Scholarship Program to build a bridge into the industry for the next generation of theatrical leadership of color. Cody, I am so delighted to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. And you're not even the main event today. So listeners, I'm now going to pass the mic to Cody to introduce our main guest today, who Cody's brought with him to talk about his history with the arts and education.
First of all, I'll just say it never gets less awkward than hearing someone talk about the things that you've done and just not responding. So that's always going to be a thing.
Well, for listeners, Cody nodded extremely supportively the entire time.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. This is wild. I just have to start by saying when I first saw Mrs. Wood, which is what I call her, I rarely call her Carrie, but I probably should now that I'm an adult, is that I was so overwhelmed with just joy. And I started to tear up, and I'm such a big baby. I cry all the time, but I just haven't seen her in so long. And it's just those moments that remind you instantly of where you started. And it's just so amazing that we're doing this today. And I'm so happy to see you. So I guess I'll introduce you. Carrie Wood is incredible. She is the person who is responsible for me getting into the theater. And that is something that I tell people all the time when they ask about my journey, is that I always speak her name into the space along with her husband, Brian, who were instrumental in me going to college, me learning what a stage manager is, and then me kind of finding my passion and fire for this art form. And she has done that for numerous other students, even if they didn't come to New York to do this thing. She helped them find their passions and kind of find themselves. And she's responsible for a lot of that. And I hope that she knows that. And I'm sure that you do. But Carrie Wood is, I don't know your official title at Waller High School anymore, but she was the head of the drama department, the theater department, when I was there That's very me. Long time ago.
Nothing has changed. I did not become any more important after you left.
To me, you did.
I am still just the director of theater. I've been through a few different partners since my husband retired a few years back, but I'm still here just hanging in there and still doing theater.
I love it. I love it.
Well, I'm excited to hear all about that journey, and I want to start, if you can. I find it really fun to have folks tell us and each other the story of the first time you remember working together. And it's okay if it's not the same story. Actually, it is often not the same story, but I would love to get us started in that place.
Well, I know this one's always embarrassing for Cody because the reason we met for the first time is he was in trouble. He was supposed to come and do auditions at the junior high, and I came and made a special trip over to see all the new theater kids that were going to be joining my program at the high school. And they had to audition to be part of our advanced class. But Cody wasn't there because he was in-school suspension. He was a little bit of a toot in junior high. So he had gotten in trouble that day. So I told his theater director, Dinah Mallman, who really is probably the true rock star out of this whole story because she did junior high theater, and that's just crazy.
Junior high anything is a little crazy,
Yes.
in my opinion. Much love to middle school teachers.
Exactly. So Dinah said he really wants to audition and he feels terrible. And I said, well, I guess I'll let him come over to the high school and have a special audition time. So he came over, and of course he was wonderful and charming. And I told him, if you ever do anything to get in trouble in high school, you are out. You have 0 strikes. You are out on the first one. And of course he was brilliant for 4 years. So. Except for that one time. Do you remember?
I don't.
The time that you got in trouble for breaking all the beakers in your science class?
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the story I remember is very similar to that. The way I tell it is that I was a troubled kid, and I knew exactly
whatever.
I knew exactly what I was doing. I was just always in trouble. You gotta make it a little light. But anyway, that's
You just
essentially
like to
what
talk
happens.
a lot.
It's true. I talked back all the time.
But did
All
you
the
know
time.
you like theater? Is that why, Carrie, you sort of made a special exception for Cody because he was a kid that everybody, oh, this is a theater kid. You need to have this kid.
He just had such, really, from his 8th grade year on, such a sparkling personality. He was always laughing, always joking. He was just a joy to be around. But the reason I kept him is he was a natural. His freshman year, he ended up, I think, as assistant stage manager for our musical. And he did every single show I directed for the next 4 years. He just was so good, so organized, so much of a natural people person. People wanted to do what Cody said. He didn't have to yell. He didn't have to fight. Everybody just wanted to do what Cody said. So he was a great stage manager.
I remember, theater was not something that I set out to do. I didn't know anything about it, but I remember talking to
Rodeo.
her. Right, I was in the rodeo.
He was
That was
a
my
rodeo
thing.
kid.
My entire family still does it. So when I told them I was doing it in high school, they were kind of like, what? But I remember after freshman year, or it may be in freshman year, Mrs. Wood was asking me to be the stage manager. And at the time I was like, you don't want me to act? You don't think I'm good? And then she was like, no, I just think you're more valuable as a stage manager because and I remember this word for word what you said to me, and you kind of just said it. You were like, you have this way of making people listen to you without yelling. And at the time I was like, oh, I get to be in charge is what you're saying. So I was like, sure, I'll do it. But I remember that, and that has stuck with me. And every time someone asked me, like, what was the spark? I was like, I remember when she said to me, I have this way of making people listening to me without yelling. And I was like, oh, and somehow I am a natural born leader. So she saw that in me at a very early age. And I think that was kind of what stood out for me.
Such a good communicator. He was also a good actor. His senior year, he won Best Actor in District for our competition show that year. So he could have done either side of the stage for sure, but he gets people to do what he says, and they do it with a smile.
I'm sure that most stage managers would agree that once you're in the heart of Tech Week and you have directors changing their minds and actors not showing up and costumes not ready, your skills in the rodeo probably paid off in the theater. I would say they are not unrelated to each other.
I would say they're not dissimilar. It's organized chaos. It's a bunch of wrangling cats and herding cattle, and
Can I just ask, for those who don't know, because we're all theater folks here, what's a stage manager?
A stage manager, if you think of a Ferris wheel, and you think of like the center axis of that. The stage manager is that center axis. It's the person that's sending out communication to everything. We're the thing that makes the Ferris wheel spin. We kind of have a hand in everything, which is why I like doing it. I like working with all departments, the cast, director, choreographer, designers, producers, front of house, the crew. I love being that person that holds the responsibility and also the person who gives them what they need to succeed, essentially. In a nutshell, that's what a stage manager is. We handle all the technical elements of the show. We call the cues. Anything you see moving, that's us, strategically calling that in the right place. We handle the schedules, a little bit of admin and secretary work in there. You're kind of a cheerleader at times. You're a therapist to some. There's a lot to it. And I like that responsibility. And I like being the person who helps people essentially get to do the thing that they do. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, I think.
And I have to say, Cody, even in high school, was an artist. He wasn't just a techie. He was the kid who wanted to go see all the high school plays in all the areas around us because he loved theater. He wanted to read scripts. He wanted to see everything that was touring through town. He wasn't just wanting to be in charge or wanting to push the buttons backstage. He really loved everything about theater.
I still do.
It sounds like, Carrie, if I may, you have a pretty special program at your high school. I mean, I'm an arts educator. I live in Wisconsin, and many of our smaller towns do not have a robust, self-sustaining theater program that affords opportunities for kids. I mean, there'll be a play, right? Yeah. And kids can act in a play, and sometimes they'll compete in the Wisconsin high school theater. But to have what it sounds like you have and the opportunities it gives young people seems pretty special. Can you talk a little bit about your program and what that means in the place where you live?
Sure. So we're in Waller, Texas, and Waller is a suburb sort of Houston, Texas. We're way out on the edges, but it's grown a lot. It's crazy. I've been here for 27 years. I've been here a long time. When I first started, it was definitely a rural school close to a big city. And we were small, and we didn't have much in the way of resources. And in fact, we didn't have a theater. We had a black box classroom, and that's where we did all our shows. We did musicals in there. We could squeeze in 100 people if we set the chairs up right. So we would always do 2-week runs of the shows so we could get plenty of audience in. But we really did theater under pretty crazy circumstances. And it wasn't until Cody's senior year that we moved into a full auditorium. They finally built one for us. And the program has continued to grow as the district has grown. When he was here, I didn't have any children of my own. Cody was my kid. And so it was really easy for my husband and I to throw ourselves into it 150%. We took trips with the kids. We drove Cody all over Texas. We drove them to Nebraska for International Thespian Festival. We did all the plays in the world because, might as well be at rehearsal with our kids instead of at home. After Cody graduated, my husband and I went on to adopt some kids. And so life changed a lot. And we have a very different lifestyle here. The program changed and evolved. But I will say, I feel like it's probably as healthy as it's ever been. We moved into a new high school building, whole new building 2 years ago. Cody, you got to come back and see it.
Wow. I do.
It is so beautiful. When it was time for us to have meetings with the theater consultant on the building, they said, well, what do you want? And I gave them my list, and they gave me everything. I have a full-size black box with a suspended grid lighting system. I have a 998-seat auditorium that has every bell and whistle you could think of. I have a costume shop with 8 sewing stations, and
Whoa.
it's like 3 classrooms together. It's so huge.
Wow.
I have my own washer and dryer. We have all the things, and it's so beautiful. And so our kids have this new level of appreciation for what they have. And we finally came out of COVID, and it took a while in education to get our footing back because we lost so much there on those years that we couldn't do things the normal way. So the batch of kids I have right now are finally kids that have done theater for all 4 years and are, really immersed in it the way they used to be. But yeah, I think our program's special. We haven't won all the awards. It's never been my goal. I've always had the goal that everybody that wants to do theater can in my department. So I have a cast of thousands in the musical, and you don't have to be a good singer, dancer, or actor to be in it. I try to choose the biggest one-act play for UIL every year so that the most kids can be on stage. I never want money or circumstances or support from your family to be something that interferes with you being able to do theater. So, yeah, they're special. Maybe not for all the reasons that other troops are, but I love my kids. I just love them.
Sorry, I just have to say, hearing you talk about it, it's amazing because I think that, people evolve and things change. And, as life happens, we find different parts of ourselves that we want to honor. And hearing you talk the mission is the same.
Yeah.
And I love that. You spend so much of your life giving to students. And I think what really just resonated with me was that, despite someone's financial situation, they should have access to whatever you have to give.
Yep.
And that's personal for me because of my lifestyle. I say very humble beginnings now just because I don't want anyone from my family to feel any sort of way. But I did not grow up.
Most of Waller is humble.
Yeah, and I didn't have all the things, and they knew my situation, and even more so than I knew my situation, because my mom is amazing, and I never wanted for anything.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize what the circumstances were. So anyway, I just wanted to call that out, and I love that mission that you have is the same, and I'm sure you are providing for students in a way that you probably don't even know sometimes. So I love that.
Well, we took a few years off of Thespian Festival, in part because I felt like it got too expensive. And I couldn't justify taking only the wealthy kids to do the fun things. So, again, I had kids, and now my kids are teenagers, and they don't want to hang out with me anymore. And so I might as well go on a trip with the theater kids who do.
Cody, do you remember the transition that Carrie was describing in your senior year into the big theater and what role you played in that? I'm imagining if you were a stage manager even then, that was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I remember. It was so exciting. And I was kind of sad that it was just now happening. I was like, I only get this for barely a year. I also remember the folks in my class because they also were just as passionate about theater as well. Chaz and Charlotte and Travis and all the folks that were around me. So we were all just very excited for the opportunity to get to do it on a real stage. Yeah, it was exciting. And I remember working with Brian, Carrie's husband, who was a technical director, on figuring out lights and
who's super cool too. He was an amazing tech teacher. He didn't know anything about theater, but he was a great tech teacher.
He was amazing. That transition was awesome. And I remember doing the first show there and finally inviting the student body because that wasn't something that ever happened.
Yep.
And it was wild. It was such a wild experience. It was amazing.
My name is Graham Isidore. I have a progressive eye disease called keratoconus. Admitting I'm losing my vision has been hard, but explaining it to other people has been harder. Lately, I've been trying to talk about it. Short-sighted is an attempt to explain what vision loss feels like by exploring how it sounds. By sharing my story, we get into all the things you don't see about hidden disabilities. Short-Sighted from CBC's Personally, available now.
Hey, Cody, can you tell us a little bit about your decision to go to Webster and to get a BFA and to get a BFA in stage management? That's an awfully specific professional ambition for somebody who is an 18-year-old person coming out of high school. Can you tell us a little bit about how all that happened?
I think we knew Cody was going to study theater in college probably his sophomore year. He ran for state office for Texas Thespians. We went that summer after to internationals, and he did his first set of auditions and schmoozing with colleges and meeting all the people. So before he ever auditioned officially with Webster, I think we had already made some connections there for him with some of the stage manager team on that campus. But it's what he had to do. I mean, he was going to go do it. And so then we had to find the money for him to do it. So, we were filling out all the forms and doing interviews and portfolios and just everything to get him ready. But everybody wanted him too. He was that kid that got all the callbacks and all the offers. And
I just want to add to this because yes, and I think I knew that I was going to study this, not really knowing what it meant. I think when you're in a small town and the only thing you have access to or only thing you see is what the people around you are doing, like the jobs that my family had, they were working to pay bills. They were working to work. None of them had really careers outside of rodeo, which is a career for a lot of my family members, is that I didn't really know anything other than that. I think when I first joined theater in high school, I was like, I'm going to be an architect or a veterinarian. And now I think that's hilarious because I don't care about either of those things. So finding my passion in school, knowing that I was going to college for it, I wasn't even thinking about having a career in it. I was like, oh, this is the thing that I'm doing now. And then what was amazing was that Carrie and Brian both were supporters of that. And they're like, yeah, you're good at this. Just do it. And there was never an end goal of I'm going to move here and do this thing. It was just I'm going to be a stage manager. I'm going to, whatever that means, wherever it goes, I'm going to do it. I'm an only child. I love exploring. So it was kind of this thing that was just okay, we're going to do that. And I remember they drove me. Well, a lot of us went to the Texas Thespian Festival. And then that summer, Carrie and Brian drove me and I think 2 other students to the International Thespian Festival in Lincoln, Nebraska. And that's when it really clicks because we were meeting with all these schools and we met a man named Peter Sargent and he went to Webster. And there was just something about him that I was like, I don't know, but I want to go to that school. And then they were like, great. And then that was the only thing that mattered to me. Ultimately, when I got accepted, again, I didn't realize how expensive school was, and Webster was a conservatory, and it was not cheap. And Peter wanted me, which I'm very grateful for, and he found some scholarships, but still, it was not enough. And I ended up applying for the Bill Gates Millennial Foundation Scholarship, and it was this massive application. And if it wasn't for Brian Wood, who really took the time to help me fill that out. I had to write essays and he was like, it's not enough. And we went back and forth and he added things and he was like, this doesn't sound like, it was wild. And he really helped me get that. And I think if he hadn't, and Carrie also, but if he hadn't sat down and really worked with me on that, I don't know how I would have gone to school. So to say I went to school on a full ride, I did not pay for anything in college because they saw something in me and helped me go after this thing that would help me go to college. So that is something that I am always grateful for.
Thank goodness for Brian, because I hate writing essays, but he really did. He sat, they sat for hours in our theater office just pounding those things out.
I say this all the time. All it takes for one person to believe in you, right? And then the possibilities are endless. And I also think that, this is probably not the podcast for it, but, education should be free.
This is the podcast for it.
Great.
Keep talking.
But the fact of the matter is, if I hadn't have gotten that scholarship, then I don't know where my life would have ended because I may not have gone to that school and I may not be here now. So I was able to go there without any worry. I was able to go there and just explore and learn and kind of just find myself. And so many people don't have that freedom or that access. So I'm so eternally grateful for that.
Yeah, it really was huge for him because everything was paid for. We didn't have to worry about, we got him into school, but he can't afford to eat or he can't afford to pay for housing. It was everything. And we knew that if he was at Webster, everything else in the world would be possible for him.
And it kind of was.
Yeah. And it has been. It's been so extraordinary to watch your journey.
Yeah.
It gets me all choked up, but...
Do a lot of the young people who come through your school go to college, or do you see more college-going kids through the arts program? I'm not trying to overly push, but wondering about, Cody, what you were saying about your experience.
I think we do see probably kids who are plugged into the arts are more likely to go to college, whether they study theater or not. I have quite a few that I'm going to be taking to Thespian Festival for auditions this year, so I've got a new batch that I'm sending out. My goal is that one of my kids will win Cody's scholarship at some point. That's what I want to see happen. We're a very diverse school district. So I think we're about 75 to 80% Hispanic now. When Cody was in school, we were about 30, Hispanic, Black, and white. But our demographic has changed a lot in the last few years. So I would love for one of my kids to end up out there with him. But I think the arts gives them a bigger picture. The arts shows them a bigger world than is just here in their classroom or in their neighborhood. So it's important for sure.
Are you aware of when you say something that's going to wind up in a promo for our podcast? Because you just did. So thank you for that. And can I just ask to poke the bear a little more on that one? Just going a little bit back to stage management, but now off of what you just said about what the arts does. Erica's book, How the Arts Can Save Education, is very much about not just arts in itself, but how do art practices and arts education, how does that filter throughout the rest of a school and throughout the rest of life? I could think of truly no role in theater or film beside more than stage manager that touches on every aspect of what it is to be a human, much less a student in nearly any career. Because again, there are certainly production roles that don't involve interacting with the other humans that much. And then there are front of camera on stage roles that don't require getting your hands that dirty. But here you have this role that absolutely sits in the middle of both. Can you talk a little bit about how you see the training of a stage manager affecting people's lives outside of the arts? I mean, we're all preaching to the converted for those who are listening to this podcast, but I also think of this as sort of the document for, we will present this to the power people and say, here's why art is good. Here's why you must fund this.
One of my biggest frustrations right now is theater has to compete with CTE courses here in Texas.
So career and technical education, listeners.
Which is wonderful. And I love that is there for kids, but it's funded in a different way. CTE courses get extra money at school. And so when a kid enrolls in CTE, the school district gets a little bit more. If they enroll in theater, the school district doesn't get extra funding. So I lose numbers to those other programs. But theater is CTE. Theater is career training. It is technology. And a stage manager is the perfect example of that. And in my program, everybody does everything. We have just started our first booster club this year after 25 years because I never wanted the kids to not be the ones making the costumes and building the sets themselves. So everybody learns to sew. Everybody learns to use the saw. Everybody learns to use the light board. The actors are backstage and the techies are on stage, and they all learn such important collaboration skills and leadership skills. And leadership training is a big, big push for me in my program as well. So at least here at Waller High School, we are CTE and we are training future leaders and people all over the career spectrum to be good at their jobs because they're good at theater.
1,000. I love hearing you talk about that because I remember taking leadership seminars and courses when I was at Waller through you.
Yeah.
And I also participated in some of the speech and debate things.
Yes.
And I think one of the reasons why, I know one of the reasons why I'm so successful is because of the foundation of my upbringing. I had access to so much. I learned public speaking. I learned what a leader was. I learned how to build community. I learned what it was like to delegate and work with people. And even if it was on a smaller scale, it was something that was built into my psyche, like to who I am. So now when I teach students, the first thing I say to them is that I'm not teaching you how to be a stage manager. Anybody can teach you that. I'm teaching you how to be a good human. Not even teaching you that, I'm giving you the tools for you to find yourself and find your voice, which will hopefully take steps for you to be a better human. You know, I think the thing that has been so maddening to me, particularly coming out of the pandemic, is just looking at some of the ways in which people have led and then being in some of those rooms and not necessarily realizing how toxic some of these spaces were.
Yeah.
And knowing that we have the power to shift that. So if I can teach one student to find their voice and to find a different way to lead and to be able to bring themselves into a space, then that I think will continue to filter through. And again, I think that goes back to the way I was raised, the way I was taught early on. And it goes back to one person believing in you and shining that light on you, you know?
Because we're a family. We always have been. Cody's the whole reason I adopted children. Absolutely. He graduated from high school and left me. And what was I going to do? Be by myself? I had to adopt some kids.
I'm crying now.
He was my first son.
My first Broadway show, Lysistrata Jones, in 2011, my opening night gift was this framed essay that you had written on one of your blogs. My best friend, Boris, printed out this blog that you had written about our relationship, and he framed it, and he gave it to me on opening night, and he was like, never forget where you started. And it's something that I still have in my apartment to this day.
That's a new story. I haven't heard that one.
I'm going to ask a super pedantic question now after that, which I don't know that's going to sound. But I'm curious about something you said earlier, Carrie, about the composition of the kids who live in the area, who go to the school. And, you know, you had said when Cody was there, it was sort of a third. And how much does the young people who show up into the space influence the art that you decide to make? And, you know, I'm interested in how that's changed, but I'm also interested in, Cody, how that's influenced the kind of art that I have read that you desire to make and that you push in your professional life.
I don't know if it's changed so much. I've always done a lot of stuff that other schools didn't do. I always wanted to do things that were ethnically diverse. I wanted to do things that let the kids speak. We have always done playwriting. So every kid that came through my program had to write a play. Mm-hmm. And I always told them it may not be good, but you will be able to say when you're a grown-up, I wrote a play once. And so everybody has that experience, and the good ones we put on stage. And I like diversity. I like super goofy, crazy comedies. I like fantasy. I have a very particular directing style. I hate sets. So probably because I didn't have room to build one in my early years on our tiny little black box, but my directing style has always reflected that. So you better be a good actor because there's not anything pretty behind you to back you up. I don't know. I try to give the kids a a wide variety of experiences. And, depending on who's in the room at that moment, I try to give them things that are going to feed their skills. I just like to have fun. I like to do theater's really fun. I don't know how other people teach other things because I laugh all day long and we play games and we're silly and calculus.
Yeah, same. I do this because I like it and I enjoy it, and I search for joy wherever I go. If I'm the source of joy, great. If I'm not, I'm searching for it somewhere else.
Yep.
So I have to be having a good time. And the fact of the matter is it's too hard not to be having a good time. Even if you're doing a show that is depressing, even if you're doing Sweeney Todd or Ragtime or any of these shows that have beautiful meanings and make you question things, there has to be a joy. We just did Parade, which is a very deep and moving story, but we had a beautiful time doing it. We laughed along the way. We cried. We shared community. And those are the types of rooms I want to be in. I want to be in with people who want to do it. I want to be in the rooms with people who care about other humans, who laugh, who make space for someone to tell a story because they just encountered this crazy thing on the street, or make space for someone who's having a terrible day and they're like, I can only bring 25% of myself today. And that's okay, as opposed to you not being heard or you not being seen or you having to code switch into another person just to be respected, which I have done and a lot of people still do. Yeah. It's too hard and it's not necessary. And so those are the types of rooms that I try to put myself in. I'm in a different position now to where I can kind of pick and choose those rooms. I know not everybody is fortunate, but hopefully, more and more rooms like those will exist. So it's not, you're having to put your head down and sit in a corner because you're not allowed to speak because you know what I mean? So just trying to find those spaces.
I think that I try to do that in my classroom to make it a space where everybody gets to find the joy and find the beauty. But we do plays outside of school and we do plays in class. And I try to make sure that every kid gets a big part. Every kid gets the lead at some time, and it may not be the show that everyone is going to see, but everybody's talented. They just haven't found it yet.
And you also, by doing that, you help people find a confidence that they don't know they have. Yeah. Getting to just learn the responsibility of learning lines and leading a thing, regardless if they're good or not, it's a confidence building thing because you're reassuring them that they can do it. And I love that.
They're not all going to go to Broadway. Just no. Cody. But but they're all going to hopefully take something really valuable from the class.
Totally.
Yeah.
I want to know what your play was titled, Cody.
Oh, I do not remember. But I do remember that what I wrote, it was like a 2-person play because I wasn't trying to do anything crazy. But I don't remember what it was called. I do have, though. It's here somewhere. I have we had to make a commonplace book. I don't know I don't know what class it was for, but it was like a scrapbook of your senior year or whatever. And I go back and look at it because I've cut out pictures and put things there. And I wrote these ridiculous quotes and like all these silly things. But one of the quotes I remember, like one of the things I wrote down was like, I'm leaving Waller and I'm going to be on Broadway one day. And here we are.
I knew it.
It was a prediction book, not just a memory book.
Maybe.
Cody wrote some good stuff. We did a variety of different kinds of playwriting, so everybody had to write just a regular 10-minute play. But we also did a show where everybody had to write monologues based on personal experience. And I remember that he wrote a very hard monologue about some really personal stuff. And we went back and forth about whether he was going to perform it in front of his family or not. And it was pretty big. So,
oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
Do you remember that? Yeah.
I do. I would be so interested to read that again. Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah. Wow.
Did you perform it?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But it was hard.
Yeah.
It was big stuff.
I was going to say, even that kind of experience, I think, is part of the human condition that you've been talking about, Cody, and the importance of art making as scaffolding risk-taking for people.
Yeah.
As creating the capacity to take those risks that allow us to have the kind of human interactions that we crave and that we strive for. And you can't do that without taking a risk. And you can't take a risk unless you're scaffolded to get there, right? You can't just say, well, jump off this building now. I can imagine how many steps it took to the point of, okay, I'm going to perform this monologue, for my classmates and for my family. And that scaffolding process, I think, is such a huge part of what makes having an incredible arts teacher be the foundation for your educational experience.
I was going to say it's also just about feeling safe. So, I'm an only child, like I mentioned earlier, and I grew up with a lot of my cousins, so I had people around. But outside of my family, there's not really places where you feel safe to be yourself. And even inside of your family, sometimes you don't really know how to be yourself because you're wanting to be the thing that they want you to be. Even in writing that monologue and performing it, even beyond that, the theater, the Box of Stars Theater, was a place where I got to be, oh my God, where I got to be myself. I got to feel safe. And I do remember now, after performing that monologue, it helped me and my mom be able to talk to each other about things that we normally wouldn't. She did the best she could raising me, and I love her, and she was incredible. But we never talked about certain personal things because it was too much for her, or I didn't know how to do it. And now we talk about anything, So I think that was a stepping stone for us to be able to see each other in a different way, or even just to see each other in a way that wasn't mother-son. And a lot of people don't get to have that relationship, out of respect or out of whatever. So I do think that also helps me with that.
I want to, if I can, sort of fast forward and ask you, Cody, a little bit about the scholarship program that you've created. And, now I feel it's even a silly question to ask, but it's a fake question to get you both talking about this. My question I wrote down was, how did your relationship with Carrie influence your decision to be a change maker through scholarship work? I mean, now that just sounds like a ridiculous question to ask, but I would love for the two of you just to think and talk a little bit about that together, because, it seems like a very direct line to me, but that is not something that all successful artists do. Right? They don't turn around and invest their own hard-earned resources in supporting the educational careers of others. And so I don't know, how did you come up with the idea? Carrie, have you been part of that? Or how do the two of you interact around that? Or
Yeah,
I had nothing to do with it.
I mean, sure. The thing that I am so aware of as I get older is that so many people have so many ideas, but lack the follow through. And something I learned on the ranch as a cowboy, something I learned in high school theater, I continued to learn in college, was that the people that kept being put in my life were people who followed through, were people who were like, let's just do it. And that's been my mentality my entire life. I'm like, you want to do it? Let's do it. And even if it's scary, even if it's whatever, we just did it. Me and my cousins did it. I did it when I was with Carrie. Like, it was just always that motto without even thinking about it. Long story short, we were in the pandemic, and everybody was or at least my friends, we were doing a lot of self-reflection and kind of figuring out what to do, since we didn't have jobs and we couldn't really leave our apartments, and the world was upside down, and we just saw George Floyd's murder, and it was heavy, and there were a lot of conversations. And I don't even want to say lucky or fortunate, but somehow I found myself in the middle of these conversations within the Broadway community. And the more and more I had conversations, I was like, okay, we're just talking, but what can I do within this that's going to help me work through this and also help someone else on the other end of it? And I'd always wanted to do a scholarship at my alma mater at Webster. I wanted to find one student and sponsor them and be their mentor. And that was my thing. And my friend was like, well, you always dream big, so why are you just stopping there? Do something else. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And then I started thinking about the mentors that I had and kind of the values that were instilled in me. And I started specifically thinking about my first 2 years here in New York. I didn't have anybody to really go to. And then when I found people to go to, they were amazing and they helped me along the way. But I never found anyone who looked like me who was doing the thing. And I wasn't searching for it, but maybe in some kind of way I was at the time and didn't know it. So I kept thinking about that. And I was like, if that's how I was feeling finding success, I can't imagine how people are feeling and not finding success and always hit with these barriers and not seeing themselves as a stage manager or as a producer or as a director. In some ways, we tell ourselves that we can't do it. So I was like, okay, we're going to create a program for people of color who want to pursue this. And I reached out, and again, this was in the pandemic, so a lot of people weren't working. So I reached out to all of my fancy friends, and I was like, I'm starting this thing. And they all were like, I support you. You know, the Lin-Manuels.
He didn't call me because I'm not one of his fancy friends.
Well, at this time, I was specifically looking for money. And so when I said I reached out to people who had capital. And I was like, y'all all want to do stuff. So here's an opportunity to put your thousands of dollars into this program.
Yeah.
And, you know, you reach out to 10 people and 8 says yes. Great. So that's kind of how it started. And those people still support it in varying levels. But having, you know, Lin-Manuel saying, yes, I'll do this, and Jeffrey Seller, and all these people who have name recognition also draws a lot of eyes to it. So I think I was very fortunate to go to those folks. And that's kind of how it started. But to answer your question, because I know that wasn't necessarily the...
No, I think it's good for folks to hear what this program is. I mean, that's part of this conversation too, right? Is to, hear how you're literally paying it forward as well as figuratively. I mean, supporting people financially and as a mentor.
Yeah, so that's how it started. And I will say that, like, everything that I do now, even if in the moment I don't, because, you know, when things move so fast, we forget to sit and sit in the moment. But the more and more I get to reflect, I know that, you know, every step of the way has led to me creating this. You know, everything has been a piece of the puzzle. And the program has grown. Every year I have a little bit of imposter syndrome. I'm like, I'm not doing enough for the students. And then we finish the program and they tell me all these amazing things. And I'm like, oh, right. All I have to do is give space and they'll figure out the rest. There's no need to complicate it. So it's been really amazing. And we're going into our 5th year. And I hope it continues to grow and more people continue to come in. And, you know, but yeah, it's been one of the greatest joys of my life, honestly.
Well, thank you both so much for spending time with us today. I can't wait for listeners to hear both of your stories. And, you know, I particularly love hearing from folks in different parts of the country because there's kind of a universality to these stories. Like I said, I live in Wisconsin. I work with a lot of small Wisconsin communities, and there's a lot of what you said, Carrie, that resonates. But there's also a lot that's unique and interesting about, you know, being from a Texas town where being part of the rodeo is what gets folks into thinking about production making. I mean, it's just a different orientation to the world. So I really appreciate getting a chance to talk to folks who are speaking from different places, but also speaking to really similar experiences. So thank you both so much.
Thank you so much for giving us a chance to be together.
I know. This was a great reunion.
Wow. So many incredible, not just sound bites, but life lessons from
life bites. They're life bites.
Life bites. We hope you are full from all of the life bites that you got over the last 45 minutes. One that really stood out to me was Cody's description of learning to do theater in high school, not just as artistic, but I think at some point he even said, look, theater is career and technical education. And, I think what he meant by that, in addition to the technical skills that he learned, and this particular school, I think, is kind of special in the sense that there's really a partnership and a marriage between the artistic and technical sides of theater, but also the idea that learning to make theater is about learning to be a leader in a range of spaces and learning to collaborate. And all of the aspects of a good learning environment that I talk about in my book that stretch across what good learning and teaching look like. And Cody and Carrie both, I think, articulated so beautifully what that looks like when theater is the foundation for how we learn to be human and how we learn to do leadership and how we learn to collaborate and how we learn to be fully confident and actualized and realized versions of ourselves.
Yeah, it really is a job that requires everything, right? It is a full body, full mind job. It never stops once you are in production, as you're heading towards production. And so the learning of that, it's what education is, right? It's learning mind, it's body, but it's not just a list of facts you need to know. It's being prepared for two forms of the unpredictable. One, sort of the glory of theater, something going amiss, something going as unplanned. And you're Ed Harris in Apollo 13, right? You're at the command center and you have all these geniuses around you. You got to keep things calm. You got to keep things moving. That's the unplanned that will happen in theater. But the real unplanned thing is personalities around you. And in any job, you're going to need to interface with the other humans. And the training that goes for that is obviously going to serve you in every walk of life.
Another thing that I really enjoyed about this conversation was the distributed mentorship that we heard about. So I feel like Carrie's husband was on the podcast in absentia.
Right.
You know, their conversation about his support in helping Cody not just learn the technical aspects of theater, but in getting a college scholarship and co-participating with him in all that involves, and not just the social capital, but some of the technical capital that's required, and how remarkable it is to have a community, you know, led by these two adult professionals who call all of these students their children, and now including their own children, but that this community of people has built their own sense of technical and social capital that allows everyone who's a core member of this community to be successful. I mean, you know, we also heard about all the other kids who've gone on, not necessarily to Broadway, you know, as Carrie said, Cody is special, but who've gone on to careers either in theater or not in theater as a direct result of being mentored and supported in this distributed community of learners. So Alec, you know, as we say goodbye today, we like to ask each other questions, right? And have three things that we want to take away. I have a question for you.
Oh, I have one for you too. So we're going to do yours. Let's do yours, but then I'm going to tell you what mine was because I enjoyed it. But it's your turn. So go ahead.
It's my turn. Great.
Yeah.
Well, my question was, you seemed fascinated by Cody's alternative life, which was professional rodeoer. So
True.
my question is, if you were a professional in the rodeo, what would your rodeo name be?
Oh, that's a good one. It would be the 8 Seconds of Hanukkah.
1,
Lower East Side Lucky.
2,
The Coastal Elite Cowboy.
3 things. Those are excellent cowboy names. I have no idea whether cowboys have special names, but on this podcast, they do.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, the question I was going to ask you was, what are the 3 things in theater that you are incapable of doing currently? Like, what are you worst at? For the amount of things you've done in theater, what are like things you cannot do?
Quick, I can do that. Sewing.
One thing.
Oh.
Do it. Let's do it.
Yeah. Sewing.
Let's do another 2.
Organizing.
Wow, okay. You're not a stage manager.
No.
2. Okay.
Being on the highest catwalks in order to have to replace or adjust lights.
This is what inspired me to ask this question of you, as that's what came to my mind too. 3 bonus things. And now, Erica, let me ask you a question. How can people interact with our show? Because we need them to do that.
We do. We love having you. We want more listeners. We are excited to continue to bring these episodes to you. So you can follow our show on whatever podcast feed is your favorite.
1.
you can rate our show. As Alec would say, you can rate our show 5 stars.
You can.
So that it continues to pop up at the top of everybody's podcast feed.
Please, 2. Yes, should do that.
And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. Tell the world how much you love this show, because that is another way that people can find out about the great work that's happening here on Arts Educators Save the World.
3 more. 9 things today. This was a big day.
9 things. Onward together.
Arts Educators Save the World is hosted by Erica Rosenfeld Halverson and produced and co-hosted by me, Alec Lev. Our executive producer is Doug Matica, and our audio producer is Justin Asher. Special thanks to our collaborators, the brilliant and talented Kate Baldwin, and our great friends at Story Pirate Studios, Lee Overtree, Benjamin Salka, and Amy Fiore. Original music is by Dan Lipton, and our artwork is by Lyra Evans. Check out our website designed by Cole Locasio at www.artseducatorspodcast.com. We are on Instagram at artseducatorspodcast, and you can write to us with your questions and comments at contact@artseducatorspodcast.com. You can also find us at a place called YouTube. And wherever you're listening, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps the show. We're proud to be sponsored in part by the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Gibb Faculty Fellowship. Arts Educators Save the World was created by Erica Rosenfeld Halverson and Alec Lev.